Welcome to Loremen, a podcast about local legends and obscure curiosities from days of yore. With me, Alasdair Beckett-King.
And me, James Shakeshaft.
And James, this week, I have the tale of a Scottish eccentric and present-day exorcist for you. Yeah, if by present day you mean the 1970s.
Yeah, I pretty much do mean present day when I think of the 1970s.
That's pretty recent, isn't it? Pretty recent and relevant.
It's when all my books are from.
Yeah, yes it is. And my trousers. I present for your consideration Dr. Donald Omand in The Exorcist and The Idol.
Whoa, that's a good name.
Pretty good title.
I'm very excited.
Are you excited, James?
Yes. I've given this recording a very exciting name.
Exorcist Idol 2025.
Yeah, based on the 2 bits of information you told me about the story.
I told you it was The Exorcist and The Idol, but you've made it sound like a talent show.
Yes.
Have I got an exorcist for you with a tragic backstory?
Well, yeah, you don't want to know don't ask about the mum.
Well, James, you're right to be excited. The story I've got for you is so chilling and plausible that it will put you in mind of the lead actor in the BBC's mystery drama series Death in Paradise.
Who's that currently?
Do you know the name of the current lead actor?
No, I saw the Christmas special where the other one regenerated into him, like in Doctor Who, which seems to be how Death in Paradise works.
And the gold glow comes out of the sleeves. The lead actor in the new series of Death in Paradise is called Don Gilo.
Yes.
Yeah, that's how chilling this episode is, that it's going to make you want to don a gilet.
Oh, that is lovely stuff.
Although, based on his accent, I imagine maybe it's like Gillet or something, because he doesn't sound very posh.
Or French.
Or he's definitely not French. He sounds like he's from London.
You know what? On Wikipedia, it's got an accent on his E.
He's got an accent on his E?
Yeah.
It's Don Gilet.
Right. Anyway, it's on. It's on. I'm not going to get cold.
You're gilet. That's great. And
I'm begilet.
I mean, I don't want you to think that this episode is not going to have any good names in it, but I've been saving Don Gilet for a name light episode.
For a rainy day.
But he's not the only Don I've got for you, because the main character of this episode, the legend I want to tell you about, is the legend of Dr. Donald Omand.
Donald Omand?
Yeah, it's like the Omen crossed with Donny Osmond. If you can imagine that.
I can.
Very distressing.
Whoa, boom, banger, bang.
Dr. Donald Omand, born in Perth, Scotland in 1903, in the early 20th century. But his family moved to Darlington in the northeast of England when he was a teenager.
It's not as posh. Not as posh as I think, that town.
Darlington, yeah, it's Darlaw. As we've discussed previously, Darlaw is not as posh as it sounds. It's much less, darling, you must tell me the truth, darling. Could you possibly love a man who has an ordinary job in the war, but not one of the exciting ones? Is that possible?
Tell me, darling. Is it more, you're right, darling?
Well, that's Yorkshire. It's a bit more Durhamy than that.
Okay, give me a sec.
Okay, here we go. Listen, listener, as he transforms.
You're right, darling. No, I've gone.
It's the same
voice,
accent.
Exactly the same voice.
Exact same character as before.
That's right, darling. I'm trying to do it no runner.
That's right.
That's right, darling.
So he was born in Perth, moved to Darlington, and he went on to become an Anglican vicar and so much more. Donald Omand. Circus Priest.
What?
Exorcist.
Sorry?
Female dance team antagonist.
Say what?
He's perhaps most famous for being a priest who performed his ministrations for circus folk, for whom he seems to have had the highest respect.
Right, okay. He didn't perform his services bareback horseback.
Actually, James, well, just put a little pin in that.
Oh.
Because he was no stranger to danger.
It's mad. Someone having a CV where Exorcist is the one you want to ask the least questions about.
You're like, yeah. Get back to the circus. What was that?
You're a circus? What? You did what to female darts teams?
We don't allegedly. We'll deal with that.
Are we also putting a pin in that?
But yeah, let's just put a lot of pins.
Thunk, thunk, thunk.
Oh, is that the female darts team?
Yeah, they were putting pins in it, and they got a sweet 180
right into a picture of Donald Omand's face. Dunk.
Allegedly.
So I first encountered Dr Omand in an article in the Fortean Times by the Reverend Peter Laws, who listeners might recognise from Uncanny. He's Team Believer in some of the episodes of Uncanny. And off the back of that, I checked out Omand's 1970 autobiography, Experiences of a Present-Day Exorcist.
Ooh.
Which would now be called Experiences of a 50 Years Ago Exorcist.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't update book titles like that. Otherwise, it would be hard to remember what 1984 was called.
Yes, very good point.
Yeah. So they just leave the titles the way they are.
And it's the Old New Testament now.
Yeah, they are. They're both quite old. They should be called the Old Testament and the really old. Oh, that's old.
How old is it?
So I'm going to tell you about Donald Omand's encounter with a cursed idol. But first, a little background. Most accounts I can find about Donald Omand tell the story of him entering the Lion's Den, which also, now I think about it, is a TV show.
Yeah.
He doesn't go into a shark tank, American listeners. Relax.
Dragon's Den. It's a Dragon's Den.
Oh, wait. It's Dragon's Den.
It could easily be Lion's Den in another territory, though, because it is, as we said, Shark Tank in the US. Dragon's Den in the UK. Lion's Den.
Dragon's Den makes more sense because dragons sit on a pile of money that they could give you. But sharks are strapped for cash. They haven't got pockets.
Unless they're loan sharks.
Oh, maybe that's it.
But that implies that there's a follow-up series where they go around and break their legs because their product was rubbish.
Yeah. Mm.
I presume all loan sharking is referring to the illegal, dodgy.
Yes. Yeah. It's referring to the bad, illegal kind of loans, not the good, ethical kind of payday loans that everybody loves and are always great.
Yeah. They don't threaten to break your legs, but I mean, am I wrong to besmirch the currently neutral name of loan sharks?
No, I think it's okay to criticize loan sharks. And, let's besmirch them all. Also, the payday loans guys.
Yes.
Besmirch away.
I'm just saying that they, as far as I know, have never threatened to break anyone's legs.
Do you work for a payday loans company, James?
No, but I don't want them coming and breaking my legs.
So you're so hasty, so keen to say that they don't break legs because you obviously believe that they do.
Because I fear that they will break my legs. And whilst it would be ironic, I would still have broken legs.
Yeah, I'd love it though. if your legs were broken for saying that they break legs.
I'll prove you wrong. Snap, snap.
So while working in southern Germany, Omand met a ringmaster of a circus who was having trouble with his strongman. which is a big problem for a circus, The strongman is almost as important as the big pole that holds up the big top.
Mm. You could say the strongman is a tentpole attraction.
Oh, very good. Yeah, which I think actually, and I think I read this in Omand's book, but I now can't remember. I think that central pillar is called the kingpin or the king pole. So the phrase kingpin, like with your payday loans guys.
Yes.
Like criminal mastermind, I think comes from the big pole that holds up the whole tent.
Ah.
If Omand is to be trusted, footnote, maybe he is not.
Uh-oh. What was the problem with the strongman? Was he too strong or not strong enough?
It wasn't his strength, James. It was his personality. It had changed.
Huh?
Gustav, the strongman, whose name has also been changed by Omand, presumably because he's a real guy who's definitely real and this story happened. It's frustrating. His writing is full of details, often quite specific details, but it's not overflowing with the kinds of details you might ask for, like names, places, and dates. It's scrupulously lacking in the kind of details you would need if you wanted to, check any of the stories in it. So again, just put a pin in that. Just throw a little dart in that. Don't worry about that.
Okay. I mean, we're getting quite voodoo doll with the amount of pins going on in here.
Don't worry. Omand is on hand.
Apologies if that is not accurate. Voodoo doll Smiths, please don't stick pins in an effigy of me in order to prove that you don't do that.
I think it's not accurate. I think the practice of sticking pins into dolls is European magical practice, not a West Indian one, I think.
Okay. Well, also, don't break my legs about it, anyone.
Nobody break James's legs. Now, I don't actually know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. I keep going between Omand and Omand.
Alasdair was 6 series in.
No, I know how to pronounce your name. James Shashakifar. Shashakishaft? Where's the F go?
Spacecraft.
Jimmy Space. They call him Jimmy Space. So, Gustav, the strongman, had been a gentle giant and a devoutly religious fellow, but in recent days, his personality had taken a change for the worse, James, a much, much worse change. And he was angry and surly and frowning the whole time. And the ringmaster explained what he thought was the cause of this problem. And I'm going to quote from the book now. The strong man was of a religious nature, and he had gone into the main church of the town to pray, as was his custom. As he was entering the church porch, he disturbed a group of evil-looking men and women who were gathered on the steps. They were intently watching a man in their midst, whose face was the most devilish that Gustav had ever seen. And the guy in the center was, with his hands, he was performing the Eucharist in reverse order. Now, I'm not a religious expert, but that's like pulling bread out of people's mouths?
Yeah, that is.
And then sucking wine into a cup?
Yeah, getting them to spit wine into a cup, taking a little space invade.
Yeah, the Space Invaders will be all wet. They'd go soggy. The sherbet will be coming out.
Fun fact, Alasdair, they are literally church wafers. Those little space things with the sherbet in them.
Yeah, for listeners who didn't grow up with these, they're a little flying saucer shape with sherbet inside them. What are you telling me, James? That those are literally the body of Christ?
They are the body of Christ because
they're the body of Christ in space,
and they compel you.
Space Christ.
They compel you to have more sherbet.
They get them from the same company.
The company that made church wafers. Because of declining church numbers, they needed to find a way to boost the sales, so they invented that sweet.
We can't stop selling wafers. It's all we know. I imagine his assistant would be called Mildred.
What was it called? Flying saucer sweet.
So they invented a sweet that used the only thing they knew how to make, which was Jesus Christ's body.
Yeah, it was the Antwerp-based producer of communion wafers, Belgica.
Oh, I did the wrong accent there. I didn't realize it was Antwerp.
Yes, sorry. I'd like to hear that again, please. Say darling. No run up.
Wait, I have to embarrass myself. What country is Antwerp in? It's like Holland?
Belgium.
Oh, I'll just do a classic Flemish accent that we all immediately recognize. Oh, no! Our machinery is worthless due to these declining church numbers. We must diversify!
Exactly.
Mildred. So, yeah, as I'm sure you've inferred, Gustav was a spectator of the Black Mass.
Oh, no.
His horror must have shown on his face, for the celebrant, who very possibly was an unfrocked priest, suddenly gave vent to chuckles, which seemed to the strong man to emanate from hell itself. Then he, who had such physical power that he could support the weight of 8 fully grown men, passed from horror to terror and fled back to the circus, the diabolical chuckles still ringing in his ears.
Oh, I thought this was at the circus, and I wasn't sure if Chuckles was a clown.
The diabolical Chuckles. Really very, very bad clown.
When Chuckles goes to do the fake-out bucket of water, there is really water in it.
Chuckles! So he thought he'd escaped, but in fact he had carried something terrible with him. An evil spirit had obviously followed Gustav, and he was becoming possessed. He was succumbing to its power. Omand heard this story and thought he had to act, so he came along to the circus to help with the ringmaster, and when he arrived, they were in the middle of a performance, which was going well, until Gustav, the strongman, approached the lion's cage and began a rattling on the bars, which, James, I don't know if you're an expert in handling of wild animals, but that you shouldn't do that. you're not supposed to rattle the bars.
Yeah, I would guess not.
It seems obvious, but sometimes you just have to say, don't rattle the bars. He was rattling those bars, and just when you might have thought he was about to bend them apart with his superhuman strength, he slumped into a faint. He's out cold. He's gone. And a moment later, the two lions pounced on their handler and mauled him most terribly. Yes, James, the evil spirit had leapt from Gustav the Strongman to the lions themselves. Obviously, that performance was a write-off.
You'd hope.
The lions were got under control, and it was very clear that it was now the lions that needed to be exorcised. And Donald Omand stepped up, not just up, but actually into the lion's cage to exorcise the beast. And that was not the last time he would step into the cage of a wild circus beast in order to bless it. And he insisted always on stepping into the cage. There's photographs of him there, a few feet away from the lions. He insisted on going into the cage because it wouldn't work through the bars, I think.
What?
He writes in the book, like, people say, why can't you do it from the outside? And he writes, I think the best answer to such a remark came from a much-beloved circus owner who is, alas, no longer in this world. He countered the question with another one. Why do army chaplains go abroad with the troops? He asked. Surely they could pray for those engaged in battle in the safety of their own homes.
Actually, quite a good point.
It kind of works, but I kind of think the chaplain is there for chats and conversations. That's the reason. They didn't have Zoom in those days.
Right.
I don't know. He says that he says he's doing it out of respect for the handler, because by going into the cage, the handler takes a risk. And by going into the cage with a stranger, the handler places themselves at even greater risk. But I'm not sure if that actually is respectful.
I don't
so much as endangering the handler unnecessarily.
Yeah, that sounds worse that sounds disrespectful.
You're making it much worse. But hey, that's what he did.
But sorry, Alasdair, the tone of what you've been saying, it sounds like he's been doing this more than once.
Oh, yeah.
What?
Yeah. There are many, many stories. He exorcised lions. He exorcised your vampires. He exorcised your Loch Ness monsters.
What?
He exorcised a little-known triangle called the Bermuda Triangle.
What?
Heard of it?
Yes.
He hadn't.
What? Why?
He was in the area in the 50s, and they were like, you got to check out this triangle. And he was like, this is the first I'm hearing of it. Straight away exorcised it.
Boom, get rid.
Boom, out, done. Bring on the next polygon. After a lecture in the USA, he was approached by two members of the OIPD, two agents of the OIPD, which is the Organization of Inquiry into Psychical Disorder, which, when you say it out, has the real ring of a thing that was arranged because it sounded good as an acronym.
OIPD, nobody moves.
OIPD, freeze. And he was asked to join the ranks of the OIPD. And the OIPD is an organization that investigates psychical phenomena, and it is very secretive. So secretive that no one, apart from Donald Omand, seems really ever to have heard about it, or have written about it, or to have any knowledge of it whatsoever. But I can't help but think it sounds quite cool, and like maybe they have a badge.
Yeah.
Like a flip-down badge.
What happens when you get kicked off the OIPD?
You probably have to hand in your holy water. Your badge and your holy water,
and your dousing tongs? Tongs? Are they tongs?
Somehow it sounds right, but I'm sure it must be wrong. Fork, dousing rods.
Yeah. Well, OIPD.com is for sale, so they are very secretive in that they don't have a website.
They're so secretive, they're not real. Omand travelled the world as a psychical investigator, as a member of the OIPD, lecturing, exercising people, things, and places.
Wow.
But the story of the cursed idol that I want to tell you, James, begins closer to home, in Scotland. Omand was giving a lecture in Edinburgh about Chinese figurines, and afterwards he was called upon by a young man. And this story comes from experiences of a present-day exorcist. My visitor, an undergraduate at Edinburgh University, was obviously under extreme strain, which was not surprising in view of the story he told. This concerned a Chinese god, less than 18 inches high, which had been carved centuries before out of the root of a tea plant and stood upon a pedestal constructed of the same wood. According to the young man, the idol had been worshipped for hundreds of years in a small village in China, and appeared to bring its devotees good health and prosperity. Then, about 60 years ago, pestilence broke out in the village, and one misfortune after another befell the inhabitants. So the villagers naturally blamed the idol for this change in their fortunes, and they stormed the shrine looking to destroy it. But they were too late, James. The priest had already liberated the idol and fled. Now, you might think that the villagers would be pleased that the hated idol was gone, yeah? What would you do in that situation as a villager?
Celebrate?
Yes.
Find out what ticker tape is?
Yep.
And have a parade about it or featuring it?
Close. Naturally, they pursued the priest across country for 3 years.
Oh.
Still trying to destroy the idol.
Come back here, you. 3 years, solid.
3 years?
Pursuance.
How do we know all this? Well, this story was told by that priest to a Presbyterian missionary in Hong Kong. The missionary was about to return to his native Scotland, and somehow he was persuaded to take the idol with him by the priest. Now, I don't know if any money changed hands there. We don't know. We just don't know.
What, by the priest buying the idol or the...
It feels like maybe a guy was sold an idol with a really good story attached to it. Maybe. I don't know. Either way, the ship sailed, and the next morning, the priest's body was recovered from the sea in Hong Kong's dockland. He had been stabbed to death. How do we know that? How did the guy on the boat find out about that in order to relate it? We don't know.
Oh, yeah, good points. Good points.
A week into the voyage, the missionary was undressing, getting ready to turn in, and he had the idol on a dresser in his cabin, which I think you wouldn't want it looking at you.
No.
It's like getting undressed in front of a cat. It's not actually a crime, but it doesn't feel good.
Got to be an inside cat.
Would you? You mean an outdoor cat? Don't get dressed in front of an outdoor cat, certainly, or a big cat. But if you do, get undressed in the cage, because it's disrespectful to do it outside the cage.
It would be disrespectful. Yeah. I mean, chaplains, they don't travel home from a war zone every day to get undressed. I don't know what point I'm making.
They strip right in front of the men out on the front lines of the war.
For morale.
Come on, boys, you can do it. Woo! So he was getting undressed, and he looked over at the idol, and he saw the idol begin to rock on its pedestal. This action is going to be repeated a few times, and I don't know any more information. I don't know if it's rocking from side to side. I don't know if it's nodding backwards and forwards, or if it's just shimmying. I don't know whether the idol is sort of one congruent piece with the pedestal or not. Either way, he's not touching it, and it's very strange that it's rocking on the pedestal. But he thinks it must just have been an optical illusion. You know, he's tired.
He might have been getting nearer and further away from it very quickly without realizing.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe he was nodding off to sleep, and literally his head was actually moving closer.
It does sound a bit leery if he's just taking his clothes off and it's like...
Yeah, yeah. He woke to a terrible crashing sound. The ship in great turmoil. A storm had struck in the night, and the vessel was going down. He leapt out of his bunk, and the only thing he did on the way to the lifeboat was snatch up the idol. But James, it wasn't on the dresser. Wow. It was on the cabin floor. Yeah, maybe it had fallen off when the ship was rolling and pitching. No, somehow, in spite of all that movement, it stood upright on the floorboards of the cabin. Most strange. So, with clutching the idol in his nightgown, he ran to the lifeboat and he was rescued. The ship went down and many hands were lost, and presumably whole sailors as well.
Yeah, it would be bad luck to just lose their hands.
Unlikely, just statistically. Eventually, he made it home to Scotland, where his wife and his 2 adult sons were waiting for him. And the sons were training to be doctors in Edinburgh, which is just a classic thing to do.
Yeah.
In a story like this.
Absolutely.
Training to be a doctor in Edinburgh. Mwah. And those sons were, energetic young boys full of bobbins. They like to get up early and go out swimming and boating on the nearby loch.
Boys being boys.
Yeah, just general boy stuff. Nothing could go wrong there. Relax. One night, a few weeks later, the missionary was reading British Weekly. It specifies what he was reading. How Omand knows what he was reading when this story took place, I cannot imagine. But he was reading the British Weekly, and he looked up to see the Chinese idol on a sideboard, and the idol was once again rocking. Of course, he remembered that that's what he saw just before the storm hit the ship, but he wasn't in a ship now. He was in a house.
Yeah, houses can't crash.
Houses cannot sink. He slept fitfully that night and rose with a sense of alarm to the sound of a storm. So he went to check on his sons. Hurriedly, he looked in the adjoining bedroom which the two young men shared. As he feared, it was empty, and, sobbing, he moved desperately from the house to the edge of the swollen, wind-swept loch where a few crofters had gathered, gazing across the waters. Far out could be seen a tiny craft dancing crazily. Suddenly it seemed to stand on one end, and then disappeared. Crying bitterly, the old man would have cast himself into the perilous waters in a mad attempt to swim to his sons, but kind hands restrained him. Some days later, the loch surrendered the young men's bodies. Very sad. So, tragedy had struck. The idol ended up at a friend's house, a skeptical friend who didn't believe in curses or anything like that.
Not a frenemy.
Not a frenemy, a true friend. And the house of that friend, it burned down, James.
Oh.
Yes, it burned down, all apart from one Chinese idol.
A wooden Chinese idol as well.
The self-same Chinese idol, yes. An idol you'd think would be prime for burning.
Mm-hmm.
The idol was sent to a museum. That museum, what do you think?
Well, it either sank or burnt down.
It burned down. It didn't sink on this occasion.
It blew away or was involved in an earthquake. Could be the sort of to round off all the elements.
Yeah, or maybe it could be defeated by wind, or I don't know. Loads of monkeys came in and just tore it apart.
Nice.
The museum burned down. Apart from a single Chinese idol, the only thing that remained after the fire, seemingly. And the idol was now being returned to the very same young man who came knocking on Dr. Omand's door. I think he's the son of the friend whose house burned down. So he lost his parents to this idol.
Oh my gosh.
Pretty serious. So you can see the predicament he's in. Does he go and collect the idol? It's on its way to him right now. What's he going to do?
Sell it? Sell it to a guy at a port?
You could sell it to a guy at a port. In fact, what he does is he comes to ask Dr. Omand's opinion, and Omand says, don't worry, we'll go and collect the idol together. And they do that, and they bring it back to his hotel room. He places the figurine on a writing table and immediately calls room service for a load of salt.
Right.
Which I think you need for exorcisms.
Okay.
Just get me all the salt you've got. And he flashes his mime school card down the phone.
It's tough to do it in an audio. I just did it again.
Yeah, it's very hard to do down the phone, isn't it? You'd need a video phone. Why, what on earth are you going to do? The young man faltered. I am going to exorcise it, and not before time, I answered. The killing of the Chinese priest was no doubt a human act, but for what has happened since, this gentleman is responsible. I took 2 hotel ashtrays to act as containers for the salt and the water, and was washing them in the hand basin when the young man shouted hysterically. I turned quickly, and I know that what I saw was no illusion. The idol was rocking on its pedestal. Then the movement suddenly ceased. Burn it! Burn it! Don't risk another tragedy, the young man pleaded. But Omand cannot be persuaded. He knows the story of the idol needs to end here. He sends the young man away. He says, I'll deal with this. And he performs the exorcism. I have exorcised in my time numerous so-called gods, and as many figures and other devices used in black magic, but I shall always think of that Chinese idol as my greatest adversary. The forms which I used both for the making of holy water and the subsequent exorcism were those of my own translation from the primitive Latin. He performed the exorcism, James, and then nothing seemed to happen. He had to play the waiting game. He had to wait until dawn to see if the exorcism had been a success or whether he was going to catch on fire or maybe sink.
Yeah.
It was a long and tedious night. I read, wrote, and played patience. Between times, I looked at the idol, but it remained motionless and devoid of life. At last, it was daylight, and it was as great a relief as the all clear in the London Blitz. The danger was over. I could sleep in peace. I rose late and made my way downstairs in time for lunch. To my surprise, the young man was waiting in the lounge. He came forward eagerly. Thank you for everything, he said. I shall take the figure with me now. I know how hard he struggled to make that decision. The craven who masters his cowardice is the greatest hero of all. So the Chinese god was taken out of my hotel bedroom, but not out of my life. You will be surprised to know that I see him regularly. Whenever I do, I cannot help reflecting what an uncommonly beautiful fellow he is. So that is just one of the tales of Donald Omand.
Donny Omand.
Yeah, and for balance, I should add that according to the 14 Times article, he was banned from 3 pubs for drunkenness. And one local said it was because he was harassing the female darts team.
Oh.
Balance.
And what was he banned from one pub for stealing ashtrays?
Misuse of ashtrays. He was terrible for it.
He was washing them up. He just grabbed them off the table half used.
Yeah.
But also, not cool about the darts.
I feel like if you're ordering that much salt, you could get some bowls.
Yeah, they're not going to bring it loose. They're not going to bring a salt shaker and pour it out into your hand.
Could you bring me up a quart of salt, grain by grain? Each bellboy carrying a single grain, please. So that's the story of The Exorcist and The Idol, or Exorcist Idol 2025. Would you like to score the story of The Exorcist and The Idol, James?
Absolutely.
My first category for you is rock and roll.
You start with rock and... Wait a minute, Alasdair.
Oh, wait, no, yeah.
It's been 251 episodes.
Sorry, I forgot.
You are very much broken with convention there.
Just forgot the other categories. All right,
Ooh.
Forget that.
That threw me.
Erase that from your memory, listener. The first category is names, and please try to remember Don Gillet when naming. So Donny Omand, great name.
Donny the Omand. I like it.
Gustav
the Strongman.
Gustav, not his real name, but still a good name.
We didn't get the name of the darts team that was so harassed.
We don't know any of the name of the darts team. I see them as probably a Sarah in there, maybe a Meg.
Oh, I was thinking of like the team name.
Oh, the team name.
The High Flyers, or the good at darts, True Arrows.
Yeah. 100 and ladies.
Oh, 100 and ladies.
Doesn't really work as a pun, but they could be called that.
They could, yes. It's 3. It's solid.
It's 3.
There's a couple of Dons in there. And
we got Donald Omand and Don Gillet. And Donny Osmond.
And the idea of Donny Osmond, yes.
Yeah. We don't know the names of the OIPD agents, but we do know that the OIPD, that's a cool name.
That's a very cool name. Yeah, no, it's a solid 3. I'm not going to budge.
Category the second, supernatural.
Ooh, wow.
I didn't even mention when he did the Bermuda Triangle. I just skimmed it.
That just, as a sidebar, yes, he exercised the Bermuda Triangle.
By the way, just exercised the Bermuda Triangle. Don't like to talk about it.
Is that why we can't find the Loch Ness Monster now? Exercised. Boom.
I believe he exercised the demonic presence, but not the monster itself, because you can't exercise away a monster. So I think it may be the case that there is a Loch Ness Monster, and
go on.
Bad luck, it was possessed. And he exorcised it to make it nicer.
Was that the presence, what was the wickedest man in England? What was he called again? I've forgotten his name.
Alasdair Crowley.
Alasdair Crowley was supposed to have done some sort of rite in a house on the edge of Loch Ness.
Yes.
And brought on a malevolent presence. So maybe he was busy exercising that.
He probably it's probably just cancelled that out.
Yeah, I like the idea of this idol. I like it. No, you might think, it could have just been a coincidence that those ships sank and those 2 houses burned down and then didn't anymore. But I like the idea of the cursed idol, and I also like the idea of the TV program Exorcist Idol 2025.
Yeah, that's a good idea, and you can't have that without the story.
So I'm giving it a 5.
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. Oh, so I got all this salt for nothing. Grain by grain. My next category for you, James, is rock and roll.
Rock and roll.
Rock and roll. Because the idol rocked, didn't it? It rocked. But it also literally rocked on its pedestal.
Yes. The boat.
Being a member of the jet-setting OIPD, putting out fires all around the world, that's pretty rock and roll, isn't it?
That is pretty rock and roll.
Having a beef with a female dance team, pretty...
Yeah.
That's not that cool, actually.
A lot of rock and roll stars have been revealed to be problematic in similar areas.
Yes, that's true. They've probably been banned from drinking establishments as well.
Yes, they've done more than steal ashtrays.
Yeah, but they've definitely got up to weird stuff in hotel rooms.
Yep.
So that's quite rock and roll.
Also, if it doesn't I don't know what your final category is. This idol sounds like a weeble.
It is. That is not my final category. It is like a weeble. Now, James, remind me, weebles, they wobble? Correct.
Yes.
Do they fall down?
No, they do not.
They wobble, but they don't fall down.
That is the thing. They wobble, but they don't fall down.
Weeble PD.
In case you don't know what a weeble is, what, have you been living under a rock in the 1970s?
Have you been living under a weighted egg?
Yeah, it's basically a weighted egg.
So what's your score for rock and roll? Rock and roll!
Oh, it's 5 out of 5.
Oh, good, because I think there was a bit more rocking than there was rolling. But good, I'm glad you didn't notice that.
Oh, no. It's all the same.
My final category for you then, James, in this tale of Dr. Omand is, you're lying. I just want to run you through that wordplay.
Yes.
That's you're lying, as in you're lion, a lion that belongs to you.
Yes.
But it sounds to the ear like you're lying. You are lying.
You're lying.
Because I just don't know how much I believe of this story.
Yes.
It's lacking in a lot of the essential details I would want from a story that I thought was true.
You mean the name of the newspaper the guy was reading wasn't enough?
Well, how do you know what newspaper a guy is not even related to the guy who is telling the story? The guy who was reading the newspaper is like his dad's friend. And I just don't know how you would know. Why would he tell you specifically what he was reading? It was more specific. It said what he was reading about. I just didn't bother telling you that because it's clearly an irrelevant detail. But we don't know his name or which county he lived in.
Yeah, you're lying.
I think some people might be lying.
You're lying.
If I were Donald Omand, I would be very concerned about the lack of specific details in the book. And I would maybe have a word with the editor.
The provenance of the idol.
And I would be going to the chief of the OIPD, slamming my badge on the table and saying, Chief McGrift, I demand answers. I briefly forgot he was Scottish. Chief, if you want me in the OIPD, I need proof.
Omand, you're off the case.
I work better alone.
You gotta hand in your badge and your dowsing rods.
Take these pocketfuls of salt as well.
Put them in an ashtray. What are you? If you forgot
shove them in your own ashtray, Chief.
You forgot how we do things here at the OIPD. You're going up. Well, that was a lovely side play.
I'm allowed to do that sort of thing. I'm in equity. Flash my badge.
I went to mime school.
And James went to mime school. And you mimed that chief so well.
I was pointing so much. I'm going to give you a high score for this, Alasdair. I'm just also in part because I amused myself yesterday when talking to my kids about one of the books they're reading at school at the moment. I referred to it as Ryan, the Witch and the Wardrobe, which was a very, very different vibe. And then in correcting myself, I called it The Lion Rich and the Wardrobe. So it's just boys in a cupboard. It's just two boys in a cupboard. Ryan Rich
That's
and the
another
Wardrobe.
Possible name for this podcast.
Two boys in a cupboard.
I can't believe we didn't call it that. Much catchier.
Yes, definitely. Is it too late to rebrand?
Yeah. No. From now on, that's what the podcast's called. Here's to 250 more episodes.
5 out of 5 for you're Ryan. No, you're not Ryan. You're lying.
You're lying.
You're lying.
Why lying?
Why lying, darling?
You've been listening to Two Boys in a Cupboard. So what do you say to that, James? One rocking idol, eh?
That idol absolutely rocked out. It was a rock idol.
Yes.
Alasdair, what could listeners do if they wanted to hear more? Probably some outtakes from that episode and almost all the other episodes.
Well, James, there is a way. Hop onto the internet and type in patreon.com/loremenpod.
Can I just use the symbol for / or do I have to type out the whole words?
You should type out the whole word and then delete it and then use the symbol.
Brilliant.
And then when you get there, put your credit card details into the internet. It doesn't matter which website you're on. Do that, and somehow bonus content will come to your ears.
You'll join the LoreFolk. Thank you very much, all the LoreFolk who already did those things. Thank you to Joe for editing this episode.
Cheers, Joe.
If needs be.
If need be.
If needs be.
We don't have time to pronounce a long southern E.
No. If Nidbe.
Let's just stick with the northwestern
Nidbe.
If Nidbe.
Proof of Nidbe.
Is that proof but proof be Nidbe?
Yeah.